Leigh, when you hear the outlook for the fourth quarter, $60 to $62 billion in revenue and gross margin of 38 to 38.5%, can you read into that in terms of what Apple's thinking and planning on when it comes to the release of the next iPhone cycle?
It's basically right in line with numbers. It's a little bit above the Estimize consensus, or the midpoint of their guidances. As I said before, I think the best thing here is that gross margins guidance number. That's where I think people get a little bit worried at the bottom of the cycle. Looks pretty good.
John Butler, Bloomberg Intelligence. What's standing out to you when you, in your first run pass through the numbers?
I am relieved to see a decent services number because that is very high profit revenue. And I actually think if they continue to grow it at this rate, they may actually beat that target that Scarlett was talking about, that $50 billion by 2020. So to me, that's the most important number here next to China sales.
And how are they going to expand that services number? I mean, in other words, is it just existing services and a question of signing more people up, or is it a question of actually offering more services?
You know, they've done a lot. About a third of sales in the App Store is games. They've recognized the importance of games, and they've recognized the importance of sort of showcasing top-selling apps. The App Store itself is about 1/3 of revenue. So to me, that's the real growth driver. And I think those enhancements and continued enhancements are really going to help the services business.
Leigh, weigh in on services.
I don't want to be negative on necessarily like the I think obviously that's going to grow incredibly quickly, probably faster than people expect. I think the important thing to note is that when people say, well, that's a higher gross margin business, thus the multiple should be higher as the mix of revenue changes, I don't buy it, because remember, all that services revenue is dependent on people using the hardware. And if the hardware goes, the service revenue goes. And so I think everybody's kind of pegging that to lowest common denominator.
Right, it's not like you can have an Android phone and use any of the Apple services. It's discrete to the Apple ecosystem. Is Apple ecosystem in jeopardy in any way? Is it as strong as it ever has been?
I mean, it's hard to tell exactly the sentiment out there from everybody else. I can tell you personally, like, I wouldn't switch over to Android for anything from my Apple ecosystem, everything, unless again there was a really home run AI product out there, and that's coming eventually. The question is who gets to it, when, and and how.
John, average iPhone selling price $724, a pretty substantial beat. Analysts were looking for $699. What does that say to you about demand?
So the number of SKUs on the market, the number of models of iPhone on the market today versus a year ago is larger. I believe it's 8 versus 5, if I'm remembering numbers correctly. And so that tells me that it's skewing a little more towards the high end. So they're doing probably a good job selling the 8 and the 10. The 10 in particular, priced above $1,000, is driving that ASP up. So I think it really has helped them to do what I'll call product line extensions within the iPhone family, and I think they should continue to do that. They've done it in the iPad family, and it's worked well for them there. So,
how much is the pressure on for September then? I mean, you know, like I was saying this to Leigh earlier, this is a company that used to come out and, you know, surprise and delight were the words I used. And the product introductions every year are feeling a little more rote just because they've done them so many times, and the bar is higher for them to really surprise people, also because they do sort of strategic leaks. But what's the pressure look like this time around to get people to upgrade?
So 2 points. I think the wow factor in the past had to do with the fact that the hardware innovations were pretty significant at that time. That hardware innovation cycle now is done. So all the innovation is happening under the hood in the phone, and to a larger degree with some of the software and apps, the AI that Leigh was talking about, the artificial intelligence. But to me, for Apple, they made a big change with the iPhone X. It really was a design change in many ways. They took away the bezels, and they're frankly taking away ports slowly over time. And so what's going to be interesting to see in September is how those new phones look and how much they look like the iPhone X and how they're priced. Pricing is real science, and I think they need to get it right in September.